Right, to about halfway through our game now. Let's see how the scores are looking. Ooh, there's a lot of variance. Ooh, getting some big numbers now. Blanc's taking over the lead again, $933. I wish I could see the gameplay on this. It's the one weakness of Block It compared to Kahoot. I want to see how people are doing. Do people find this useful for revision? Okay, 2.5 minutes left. Let's see how we're doing. A lot of money being transferred. Clearly, some people are answering the questions well. Okay, 2 minutes remaining now. We love a bit of light jazz. Very nice, very calming for a Monday evening. Has everyone else's Monday has been good? Anyone done anything interesting today? Any topics that you really enjoyed at school or found really interesting that you've been learning about? Mm, da, 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 da. Mm. Okay, almost a minute remaining for those of you in our game. What I might start doing, pure competition into influence some people joining our game who don't normally join our games. I might start putting together a leaderboard and tracking who's winning every week, and at the end, introducing I was going to say prize, but maybe not prize, but leaderboard, sort of competition. If anyone would be interested in that, please do. What are you doing on the weekend? Okay, I got 25, 26 in my physics test last week. That's amazing. What topic was it on? Well done. That's genuinely great work. Lovely to see success stories like this. Energy. Oh, that's a good topic, that one. Okay, we've got 7 seconds remaining for those of you in the game. Blanc is currently leading with 10.4K. Okay, final standings. Third place, second place, and in first place, Blanc. Not someone I've seen doing these games here with us before, unless you've just chosen a new name today. But well done. Let's see how you all did in terms of the questions. Okay. Ooh, pretty low today in terms of correct scores. Who did the best? 87% is probably our highest, 27 against 4. Followed by Blanc. Oh, only 36% down here. Nice. Okay, yeah, okay, we're doing okay. Good job. We're going to start going back through some grammar, I think. Um, let's read the chat real quick. Amara says, I'm going to a pilot training simulation with all the things in a real plane. That's really cool. I've always wanted to do that. Um, Samir won. Well done, Samir. In Latin, got full marks. It's like amazing success stories that we're seeing this week. I hope you're all inspired because it's really cool. We've got great tests results in physics, great Latin results, got pilot training, winner of this week's quiz. Amazing. You guys are all doing absolutely smashing it out there. Right. So we're going to do something slightly different this week. I have recently taken you onto some difficult topics. We've explored some poetry. We've gone above and beyond Key Stage 3 level, which is really what this hour is about. It's year 7 and 8 with a little bit of year 9 in there. But I thought we've gone heavy recently, and I wanted just to take a step back for a couple of weeks and really focus on the basics. So what we're doing today might seem quite easy to quite a few of you, and I'm hoping it is. We're going to start our exploration on spelling, punctuation, and grammar a little bit again. Grammar is important because when it comes to your GCSEs, 20% of your English language grade is based on spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So, yes, it might be quite basic what we're going to do, but if you can master it and get it absolutely flawless and perfect by the time you reach GCSEs, then that's 20% in the bag, 20% towards a really great grade. So we're going to just take a step back because we've been trying too hard. We've been pushing ourselves really far recently. And my fault, I pushed you maybe slightly too hard. So we can do some easier stuff. Year 7 kind of level today. Um, so before we do so, let's do some recapping because we're going to focus firstly on punctuation, how to use punctuation effectively and how to use it correctly. So, let's go with a nice blue today. So, let's talk about the types of punctuation. Does anyone want to name me any of the punctuation they know? Um, there's an assembly. Anyone want to name me any of the punctuation they know that they can think of off the top of their head? I'll get you started. What about a full stop? Everyone knows what a full stop is. Any other types of punctuation I'm going to think of? I mean, Samir already went there. Comma, lovely. Yep, comma's a great one. Exclamation mark. I should really draw them out rather than writing them, shouldn't I? I'm going to start doing that. So full stop, comma, exclamation mark, question mark. Anyone want to carry on the list? So commas. We've got a colon and semicolon coming in. Kind of looks like that. Question mark, colon, hyphen and dashes. Absolutely, also in there. Slashes, brackets is a good one we've not talked about. I use my curved bracket. Why did that crash? Yeah, curved brackets are a good one. And then also ellipses. Ellipses are great. Yeah, I think we said them all now. I think people. Oh, apostrophes. Apostrophes one somebody said. Nice. So semicolons. Why is it not drawing? Don't know why it doesn't want to draw. Yep, ellipses, brackets, hyphens. Yeah, all of these. And they're all important because when it comes, why is Notion crashing today? Because when it comes to your GCSEs, you get marked on the range that you use and if you use them correctly or not. So what we're going to do today is talk through them first, and then we're going to work our way through as many questions as we can get through. All sort of like year 7, year 8 sort of grade. So it is a bit simpler, but I promise you it'll be helpful and we'll talk them through together. So let's think firstly, let's ignore all the simple ones. We know when to use a full stop. We know when to use exclamation marks. We know when to use question marks. Let's talk about the more complicated ones. When would you use a colon? Does anyone know? Anyone want to say and use a colon? Someone's also said speech marks as well. That's definitely one we missed. Nice. Before a list. Lovely. A list. More, 5 people have come through and said a list. Absolutely right. Yeah, you'd introduce a list with a colon. Any other ways you'd use a colon? I can think of one other way. A list is definitely one of them. Explaining a reason. Yeah, like introducing extra information is definitely one. Extra info. So if I was thinking of a list, for example, let's say I was talking about the pets I had. You might say something like, I have, colon, if I was starting a list, a cat, a dog, and a parrot, for example. And a parrot. Yeah, and that would be how I would start a list, something like that. Now, introducing extra information is another way we can use a comma. For example, if I was saying something like, I love, oops, got the I love pizza. Maybe I'd want to put a comma there and then say something like, I don't know, peppers are my favorite topping, something like that. Peppers are my blah, 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 favorite topping. So yeah, I could either use it to start a list or I could use it to present extra information to you. And we'll look at some of those today. Let's see what's being said in the chat. Connect, emphasize, lovely. What about a semicolon? When would I use a semicolon? Like that. When would I use a semicolon? Any have any ideas? Semicolons are one of those ones that people don't tend to use that often, but are easier to use than you would think. And they're great for high level punctuation. In a list is a great one. Yep, in a list, definitely. Oops, but high list. In a list, to separate. Now, separate sentences, I'll be very careful here. I'm going to be even more specific and say separate clauses. You could definitely use it to separate clauses. Um, you can also use it you can also use it before conjunctive adverbs as well. And I'll show you an example of all of those. So before conjunctive adverbs. So let's start with the list example. Yeah, you could use it to break up a list, let's say. So for example, I'll come over here. Let's say I was packing for a holiday. And I could say, when I pack for a holiday, I make sure I have my passport, tickets, and a book for an airport. So I'll start half of the sentence. I put tickets and a book for the airport. Now, I could use a semicolon after that to start new items in a list. So I say tickets and a book for the airport. Semicolon, sunglasses, sun cream. What else should I put in? Maybe sandals and a beach towel. Something like that. So what I've done there is I've just separated items of the list by using my semicolon. Definitely something you could do. Let's see what's being said. Conjunctions. Yeah, some said conjunctions. Absolutely. Let's go on to now let's do connecting ideas first. Makes more sense. Yeah. Can anyone remember what independent clause is? We'll look at clauses later in the future, but does anyone remember what independent clause is? Because we can separate independent clauses using semicolons. Depends on where you're going, kind of. A clause that makes sense on its own, perfect. It is a clause that makes sense by itself. So I could use two simple sentences next to each other and I could separate them using a full stop. For example, something like, it was, um, I'm going to take Charles Dickens for an example. Let's say it was the best of times. And I could full stop here and go, it was the worst of times. It was the worst of times. However, I technically, instead of using a full stop, could separate this as two distinct clauses and actually replace that full stop with a semicolon. And it would still make sense because they're both two independent clauses that make sense by themselves. It was the best of times, full stop, makes sense by itself. It was the worst of times, full stop, makes sense by itself. So I technically can just link them with a semicolon if I wanted to. So if you come across independent clauses, you can just separate them using a semicolon. Okay. And then the last one we mentioned before a conjunctive adverb, for example. So let's say I had this. Let's say I don't know. Jenny spent 3 hours in the library. That's in the library. I could follow that with a semicolon. And then something like, however, um, she couldn't find the book that she wanted. Couldn't find, I'll just put, I couldn't find a book. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we could separate that. If you're going to add a conjunctive adverb in the middle of a sentence, I would introduce it using a semicolon. So that could have been however, it could be instead, it could have had therefore, consequently, meanwhile, also, any of those would have been acceptable to have after a semicolon. And that is semicolons. Trying to think of this others that I need to go through with you. No, I think we'll leave all the others for the questions. Those two are probably the higher level of the punctuation types. And it's really important that you kind of learn to get these right now, because as I said, 20% is 20% English language GCSE. So it is worth getting right. Okay, let's see what's being said. A clause that needs an independent clause is a relative or subordinate clause. Clause that can also be a sentence. Yeah, absolutely. It's a clause that can also be a sentence by itself. So when I say sentence by itself, an independent clause can just be a simple sentence. In other words. So this could have been two simple sentences, but instead I could separate them using a semicolon. Makes it more interesting and sort of higher level, I would argue. Right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk you through some questions of the different types of punctuation. Might be slightly easier, might be slightly more boring than usual, but I promise you it will be absolutely worth it. So I'll get obviously you guys contributing. I love it when you contribute. It's what we're here for. So for this, I might use red because it's really clear for you. Let me use my nice red color. Okay, so we're going to start looking at commas to begin with. It says add commas in the correct places in the sentence below. Let's think about A first. I'd like to see Jane, Phil, and Peter after assembly. Where would you put the commas in this sentence? Anyone got anything they want to contribute to here? Between Jane and Phil, absolutely. Because this is a list of people. So I'd like to see, oops, I'd like to see Jane, comma Phil, and Peter after assembly. Absolutely right. Now it depends on who you ask. Some people might also say to put a comma after Phil as well. This is a distinct type of comma we call an Oxford comma. It's technically not incorrect to put it there. Some people say it's correct, some people don't agree. We call that an Oxford comma. If you want to use it, I like an Oxford comma. I personally see that as correct, but you don't have to use it there if you don't want to. So if you want to put one before and in at the end of a list, that technically is correct, but it's also not incorrect if you don't put one. So I'd like to see Jane, comma Phil, and Peter. Perfect. Okay, what about B? I'll let you all kind of get on with B, C, and D, but we'll talk through them. Mary found it difficult to concentrate. Nevertheless, she struggled on. Is there any that would go into B? To speed it up, you might just want to put one word. After nevertheless. Yeah, multiple people getting this absolutely spot on. It is right here after nevertheless. Right there. We always follow a connective with a comma. He's certain it's the right thing to do. However, I'm not so sure. Just to speed things up for time, I'll tell you this one is exactly the same. We always follow a connective with a comma. So it has to go after however in that one as well for following the same rules. Ice cream and chocolate sauce, fish and chips and bangers, and mash are all good combinations. Where would you put them in this list? Normally, a good trick with commas is you read the sentence out loud and there are natural pauses in the sentence. If you're ever reading something and you feel like there's a natural pause, there's probably a comma goes there. Let's see. between fish and sauce, after sauce. Okay, so this is after sauce. Ice cream and chocolate sauce. Perfect. Fish and chips. See. After sauce, chips and mash, sauce and chips. Lovely. So there has to be one after chips as well because it's a separate food item. And bangers and mash are all good combinations. Yes, there we go. Okay. Metals are good conductors, but non-metals are good insulators. Where might it go in this sentence? Remember, we've got a connective technically in this sentence with our but. After conductors, before but. Yep, exactly right. Has to go before our connective, which is but in this case. Okay, Peter's favorite colors are pink, dark yellow, and green. So we've got another list here. Where might they go? After pink. Absolutely right. So Peter's favorite colors are pink, dark yellow, and if you wanted to put an Oxford comma in, it wouldn't be wrong to do so. You could put one there as well. There will be some big news this week, so be sure to check the notice boards. Where will it be for this one? G. Okay, after week, after week, after week, after week. Oh, perfect. Nice. Again, we've got a connective, so it has to go before the so. Perfect. Okay, we could go to bed or we could watch another film. Okay, after bed, after bed, after bed. You're smashing this. Constant right answers. This is amazing. Yes, so we could go to bed or we could watch another film. It's absolutely right. Perfect, guys. Okay. Um, what we might do to speed time up, because I want to go into some other punctuation, is let's do this activity here. We won't rewrite it all, but what we will do is go through and I want you to tell me if there are any incorrect uses of commas in this paragraph. Okay, so Mr. Hyde, who's my teacher, brought his rabbit into school yesterday. It has fluffy, long white fur and is very friendly. I don't really like rabbits, but I loved Mr. Hyde's rabbit. It was so cute with its floppy ears, big eyes, and long whiskers. Mr. Hyde even let me hold the rabbit for a bit. However, I was worried that it might be dirty, so I made sure I washed my hands afterwards. So let's work it through. Is there any in this first sentence at the top where you would add a comma or where you would take one away? Any ideas? After Hyde, yeah, you do want Mr. Hyde. Because what we've got here is a subordinate clause. We've got a clause that doesn't make sense by itself. The who is my teacher. If I just said that to you randomly, you'd be really confused. So we've got ourselves a subordinate clause here. And a subordinate clause is opened and closed by a comma. Now the close is already there, so I just needed to add the one before, which is after Hyde. Okay, so Mr. Hyde, who is my teacher, brought his rabbit into school. What about this comma? Do you think it's right or not, the one after rabbit? Nice. Yeah, so this is correct. So Mr. Hyde, comma, who is my teacher, comma, brought his rabbit, no comma, into school yesterday. Yeah, we don't want this one, so I'm going to cross it out. Yeah, but we just didn't need one. Doesn't need one there. Okay, it has fluffy, long white fur and is very friendly. Do we need this comma, do you think, after very? Yeah, it is. And is there any in that sentence that you would add in? Wrong. Yeah, absolutely. So it says after fluffy. Absolutely. As fluffy, long white fur and is very friendly. I'd get rid of that one there. Yes, we've got ourselves a noun phrase here. So we definitely need one in there. Okay. Let's go on to the next sentence. I don't really like rabbits, but I loved Mr. Hyde's rabbit. Is there any you would add into that sentence there? Um, yeah, sorry, I did miss out the one after long. You are right. I don't like rabbits. Nice. It's before the but for this one. I don't really like rabbits, comma, but I loved Mr. Hyde's rabbits. Absolutely right. Nice. After rabbits, good people getting this right. Oh, good, 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 good to see. Okay, it was so cute with its floppy ears, big eyes, and long whiskers. Okay, anything wrong with that sentence or any you would like to add in? No comments after Hyde. No. Okay, how about after ears? Yes, yes, yes. You definitely add one after ears. But it's floppy ears, big eyes, and long whiskers. Nice. Okay, Mr. Hyde even let me hold the rabbit for a bit. Is there anything wrong with that sentence? Do we need this comma, do you think, after the second Mr. Hyde? Ears, eyes, and whiskers. After ears. Yep, multiple people saying after ears. Absolutely correct. No, we don't need this one here. This sentence makes sense by itself. It is just one clause. Mr. Hyde even let me hold his rabbit for a bit is an acceptable clause by itself in isolation. I've already seen multiple people also suggesting to put one after however there. So, however, I was worried that it might be dirty, so I made sure I washed my hands afterwards. There is one missing in that sentence. Where is it? After however, it is after dirty. Multiple people saying the correct answer. It is there. Nice. Well done, guys. Amazing stuff. I know it's a bit simpler, but it's always good to get down to basics. Okay, that's our commas. Let's move on to colons and semicolons. So we'll start off with colons. Add colons in the correct places in the sentence below. Okay, Jackie loves Christmas. She always gets loads of presents. So this is about adding on extra information, like I was saying before. Is there any place here where you would stop the sentence to introduce the new information? After Christmas, after Christmas. Oh, multiple people absolutely slaying this. It is after Christmas. Yeah, because Jackie Loves Christmas is technically its own little clause. And then to introduce the extra information, she always gets loads of presents. Technically, it's a separate clause. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm saying slaying, aren't I? This isn't how old I am. My bad. That's my slang. Oh gosh, people are already getting the next one. I haven't even asked it. Yeah, people, let's read it. I'm seeing five correct answers coming in here. Right, Rosie was giggling. Simon's joke was really funny. Loads of people are saying after giggling is absolutely right because it's technically two separate clauses. Rosie was giggling is an independent clause. Simon's joke was really funny is a separate independent clause, so they make sense by themselves. Hey, dogs are very lazy. All they do is sleep all day. After lazy, after lazy, after lazy. Oh, seven people all got this absolutely right. It's here after lazy, introducing the new information. Yeah, I'm not that old. It's my generation's slang. You guys are generation younger than me. We invented slay. It's been that for years. Okay, right. There are two major problems with the act. The jokes aren't funny and we can't hear them. Is there anywhere it would go here? After act, lovely. Multiple people are saying after act, it's absolutely right. It's introducing new information. Perfecto. After act, oh, people are absolutely slaying this. I'm so happy because it means that when it comes to your GCSEs and you're using correct punctuation, mwah, we're going to do beautiful on this 20%. Gives me joy and confidence. Okay, add semicolons in the correct places in the sentence below. So Ben has blue shoes. Tony's shoes are red. Any you would add in here? A few more answers come in. After shoes. Multiple people are saying after shoes, after shoes. Perfect. It is absolutely after shoes. Ben has blue shoes, semicolon. Tony's shoes are red. They're two separate independent clauses. Ben has blue shoes makes sense by itself. Tony's shoes are red makes sense by itself. Okay, shopping is very tiring. It's probably more tiring than playing football. Anywhere here you would put a semicolon. After tiring, after tiring. Oh my gosh, this is good work. It is after tiring. Yeah, shopping is very tiring, makes sense by itself. It's probably more tiring than playing football. Okay, I enjoy many hobbies. Playing the violin, which my mum got me into playing. Chess, as it's a good mental challenge, and football because it's a good way to keep fit. So we're separating items of a list here. Let's see what people are saying. So a few people have said after into. Very nice. So I agree. I would definitely put one after into. Definitely there. Anywhere else, I would put one. I mean, yeah, I can see some controversy here. Some people are saying after into, some people are saying after playing. I think it kind of is indistinguishable because I also thought after playing when I first read it. I think it depends how you read the sentence because it would make sense either way. So, which my mum got me into playing. Chess is a good mentor. Yeah, and I think it would be fine either place. It makes sense whether it goes after into or playing, to be honest. But most people said into, so I've gone with there. But I think it would make sense. And then we've also got a couple of after challenge as well. So as a good mental challenge and football because it's a good way to keep fit. The reason I put them there is because there's three things in this, three subjects of this sentence. One is the violin, one is chess, and another one is football. So I've put a semicolon before the items in the list. So before chess and before football. You're very good at playing the piano. I've never played the piano. I think. Oh God! I thought you were telling me I was really good at playing piano. That's embarrassing. Yeah, you're very good at playing the piano. You must practice a lot. Okay, where do you think for this one for D? Okay, a couple people are saying after piano, after piano, after piano. No, don't worry, it's me being silly. After piano, I didn't read ahead, but it is after piano. I was really confused. I thought you were telling me I was really good at playing piano. Okay, nice. So use the dotted line to explain the difference in the meaning between the following two sentences. So the street emptied, semicolon, the sheriff walked into town. The street emptied, colon, the sheriff walked into town. Is there anyone who wants to have a go at summarizing the difference between the meanings of those sentences? Anyone ideas? A is more tense. So yeah, it's an acceptable answer. I definitely think with the colon, that's almost like the second clause is explaining the first clause. So for B, I think it's suggesting that the street emptied because the sheriff walked into town. So I almost put like because of the sheriff, because of sheriff. Whereas I think for the first sentence, it's hard to tell if there's cause and effect. It's kind of, they're definitely interlinked to each other, the two clauses, one and two, but it's not really clear how they're linked. Like the sheriff might be the cause of the street emptying, or he might be walking into town because the street is emptied. So I guess the difference is that with the colon, the second clause causes the first, but I think in when there's a semicolon, the first clause causes the second. So the sheriff walked into town because the street emptied. Whereas in this one, the street emptied because the sheriff came in. I think it's like the opposite way around, if you were trying to explain them. So with the semicolon, it shows the streets were empty as the sheriff walked in. Agreed. Yeah, yeah, yeah. With the colon, it shows the street empty because of the sheriff. The second one says why the street emptied. Exactly. I think with a colon, it gives you an explanation that the street emptied because of the sheriff. Whereas I think in the first one, they are linked, but it's not really clear how. The street might have emptied because of the sheriff, or the sheriff walked into the street because it was empty. It's not really clear how they're linked. Nice. Okay. Choose between a colon and a semicolon to complete the following sentences. So you'll need to bring a packed lunch, drinks, spare clothes, and a sun hat. Is that a colon or a semicolon? See what people are saying. Colon. Oh, semicolon, colon, colon, colon. Oh, only one person said semicolon. I would agree it's a colon. And I think the reason is because you're introducing a list. A packed lunch, drinks, spare clothes, and sun hats. And normally we use it to introduce a list. So I think it's a colon. We've had to cancel after school hockey practice. There's a shortage of light. Semicolon, semicolon. Lots of people saying semicolon. You like this lesson? I think it's nice. I think we should do more easy stuff. I push you too hard, don't I? I'm sorry. I like this. We're going to do a lot of grammar in the coming future. We'll spend the next few weeks basically just doing spelling and grammar, just to like really gauge the basics. I think is useful. Nice. Yeah, it's a semicolon because we've got two separate independent clauses. Okay. My parents had to go to a meeting with Mrs. Lawrence, the head of English, Mr. Kemp, my head teacher, Mr. Burton, my head of year, and Jane Wood, the school counselor. Let's see. Okay, we've got a few people disagree. No, 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 no. Okay, couple people saying semicolons, one person saying colon. I would go all semicolons because I don't think we've introduced the list here. I think it's any introduction of a list. I think we're just separating items of that list, which you do using a semicolon and not a colon. So I would put them all as a semicolon. Yes. Cool. Right. Come on, we've got 10 minutes. Let's lock in for the next one. Let's have a look. I might skip brackets and dashes and go on to yeah, let's do some apostrophes. I think apostrophes confuse people a little bit. So let's do some apostrophe work real quick. So add an apostrophe to the words in italics to complete these sentences. So I think that's the best thing that ever happened to me. In the word that's, where would the apostrophe go? Nice, nice. Lots of people getting it right. Lovely. It is. It's between the T and the S because it's a contraction of that is. So I think that is the best thing. So it has to go between T and S. You don't all have to shout at once. Nice. Lots of people getting this right as well between N and T. Absolutely. 'Cause it's do not. These are all contracted words. So you're the fastest worker I ever saw. Nice, nice. You and R. Ooh. Nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You and are absolutely right. Okay, when they finish, they'll come over here. Nice. Between Y. Nice. Yep, those people getting this right. It is between Y and L because it's they will. So it's a contraction of they will. Okay, I can't believe you remembered my birthday. Can't. Someone says cannot. Absolutely right. So it has to be between N and T because it's cannot. Do you know who's won the cup? Nice. Nice. I like this. It's got competition today. I can see you all racing to answer. It's quite really fun. Yep. Can we be getting this right? It is a contraction for who has won the cup. So it has to go where the missing letters are, which is between O and S. Absolutely right. Okay. Use apostrophes to make shortened forms of the words in italics. Write your answers on the dotted line. So you know you cannot ride a unicycle without falling off. So the italics word is cannot. What would this be? Nice, nice. Let's people getting this right. Lovely. It is can't. Okay, right. If Joe asks Simon, he will definitely take us. So for this, it's he will. Nice, nice, nice. Let's people getting this right as well. It is heal. We can get rid of that W and I and put heal. Okay, that is all, folks. And this time it is that is. It's nice. People getting this right already. People absolutely zooming through this. Good to see. It is that. Get rid of the I, replace it with an apostrophe. Okay, we are going out to the cinema later. People already ahead of this one. It is weird. Yeah. Get rid of the A, replace it with an apostrophe. It's weird. It does not seem likely that he knows. Does not. Does not. Nice, nice. Yeah, absolutely. It is doesn't. Perfect. Right, come on, we've only got a few minutes left now. Okay, we won't do the matching one because it's a bit difficult online. But circle either let's or let's to complete these sentences. So let's just remind ourselves. Let's is a contraction for let us. So let's have fish fingers and peas for tea tonight. Nice. Everyone getting this right. It is let us have fish fingers and peas for tea tonight. We'll have to see if Mum lets us stay up to watch it. Again, everyone absolutely smashing this. It is this one here. Let's. Yeah, it's not let us. Let's go out to the cinema. Okay, I can see loads of people getting this right again. Absolutely is. Let us go out to the cinema. Absolutely. Perfect. Right, we'll get through this last page and then we'll have to call it an evening. But I'm hoping this has been somewhat helpful revision for you, even if very basic. Okay, add apostrophes to the correct places to complete these sentences. Okay, pass mum's bag over. Pass mum's bag over. So we're thinking about possession now. Nice, because he loves people getting this right. It is there. It's between the M and the S for mums because it's talking about her bag. She owns the bag. So we've got to use an apostrophe to signal ownership. Okay, Bill's football kit is filthy. Okay, again, loads of people getting this right and getting the next one right as well. So Bill's because it's Bill's football. Okay, oh, we're speeding ahead in all of these. Okay, loads of people saying Elizabeth's for the next one. It is because it's her mum. Loads of people I've already seen put Jack's. Perfect. What about it's the lady's turn to go first? Oh, the people have skipped the ladies one. Is the ladies? I think Farid's got it right. Nice, nice. Most people getting it right. Yeah, for this one, it has to go at the end of the word. When we're dealing with plurals, it always goes after the final S of that word. Whereas before, we were dealing with singular people. So it went after their name, followed by an S. But this time, the word is already plural. There's already an S there. So it goes after that final S in the plural. Okay, that's the mice's house. It's the mice's house. Oh, a couple of the discrepancies on this one. Oh, ho, ho. I tell you, it actually before the S. It's kind of 50-50 in the in the chat. People weren't sure if it went before or after the S. Um, Yeah, because technically we're dealing with one entity here. We're not, I know it's mice is plural, but the plural of mouse is mice. It's not mices. So if it was mices, then we'd already have an S there. But because we don't have an S naturally on mice, it can't be mices. It has to go before the S and after the actual word itself. Okay. Mrs. Jackson's class is taking assembly. Oh, I've missed G, but we'll go H first. Mrs. Jackson's class is taking assembly. It is Jackson's there. Sorry, who said Aya? Which one? Yeah, it should really be. That's the mouse's house, to be honest. But because we've already got plural mice, like the natural plural of the word is mice. So if the because we're ladies, there was already an S on the end. Normally, that means well, sorry, the apostrophe therefore had to go after that S. But because mice is not normally mices, it's just mice, we put it before the S. But if there was already an S there, then it would go after the S, but there's not. So it'd have to go there. So you're always looking at whether there's an S or not. If there's already an S, it goes on the end. If there's not already an S, it doesn't go on the end. Okay. We'll do these final four. Give me Jane's homework. Anyone already done Jane? Done Jane. Unless it was a name. Yeah, mice is yeah. Mice could be a name. So Jane's absolutely right. It goes there. Someone's already given me them all. Tom's absolutely there. The other children's parents were nice. What have we all put for this? Quarter past normally. Oh, for some reason I thought it was near quarter past. It's not. We've got a little while. Um, okay, children's. Again, a very complicated one. It's technically before the S because similar to mice, children is already plural. But you don't say children's, you say children. That's the plural. So because there's no S, then it goes after. I mean, it goes before. But because if there was an S there, then it would go after. But because there's not an S naturally there, it has to go there. Okay, the women's dresses were all the same. Let's have a look. Same thing. Because women is already plural. That doesn't normally have an S. Somebody said I missed out G. I absolutely did. Put all the babies' pictures together. Goes after the S because there's already naturally an S in the plural of babies. Right. Sorry, I didn't realize what time it was. I thought we were later than we are. We've actually got a few extra minutes. Um, should see if we can vary this up. No, we'll keep doing these. Right. Use possessive apostrophes as an S to shorten the phrase below. The first one has been done for you. The head belonged to the man's head. Okay, so you kind of get the point. We're putting a possessive clause together to contract the sentence. So the head belonging to the man, you could say the man's head. So you're looking for the subject of the sentence. And the first one, it was man. So that's what became the possessive thing. And the next one, the subject is Nat. So you could say Nat's football because we're looking for the subject of the sentence. So let's go with okay, let's go with Carlo. Carlos. The scar belonging to Carlos. I know a couple of you have already put this in. Oh, now this is a good one as well. Because there's already an S in his name, I would just put an S on the end. Because it should be Carlos's, really. Um, but there's already an S in Carlos. So it just goes at the end of his name. You could, if you wanted to, put an extra S there. You don't have to, but it should really be like that. It's not going to be there because his name has an S on the end. You can't put it in the middle of his name. It has to go at the end of his name. Like the same rule is applied to all of the others. So the leg belonging to the horse. Nice. We was in the right one here. It's exactly horse's leg. Or the horse's leg, sorry. Okay, the label belonging to the video. Label, nice. Okay, nice. We're getting this right. The videos, label. Absolutely right. The hat belonging to the chef. We'll do this last question and then we'll call it, I think. Anyone do this last one? The hat belonging to the chef. Nice. It is the chef's hat. Perfecto. Brilliant. Right, we'll call it there then. You're welcome to stay around for the GCSE session. We'll be going back into our AO4 work. Absolutely fine. If not, have a nice week otherwise. But yeah, we'll continue with our grammar work next week and our spellings. Good to get the basics in check. I'll stay around for a couple of minutes whilst I set up the bucket for GCSE. You ask me any questions if you want to also. Oh, anyone have any preference on games that they want to play for GCSE? I want to do one we've not done. The gold stealing one. I thought we'd done the gold stealing one. Have we not? But we can do the gold stealing one again. Yeah, go on. It was 7 minutes. Cool. Right, there you go. GCSE or if anyone's staying. And I'll leave you with this for a couple of minutes just to get on. Right. Right. Welcome everyone to the GCSE session. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Google just crashed on me then. Let's restart the game. Right, I'll give you a minute to join if you want to. Sorry, we started a bit behind because I think everything's been crashing for some reason. Notion crashed loads in the last hour for some reason. Um, Cool. Right. So I give you a minute to join. You can always join mid game if you want. We're not going to do a long one today. I might just limit it to 5 minutes so we can get on. But this is hopefully some good English language revision for you. The Gold Quest game, has been the one that's been requested. But welcome to everyone coming in. Hope you're all good. Hope you've all had a good week. Literally, we'll just give you another minute till 18 minutes past, and then we're going to make a start. Nice. I'll put the code in the chat for anyone who's not joined yet who wants to join. And we'll make an official start. Okay, right. Right. So for anyone who's not in the game, the ID is still there. If you want to join mid-game, we're going to do 5 minutes, not even seven. We're going to do 5 minutes. Just a bit of practice. For those of you who are not in the game, how has your week been? Has anyone got any successes that they want to share? Anyone done any tests? Even if you've just done something you're proud of this week, extracurricular, it could be at home, anything you want to share this week, please do so now. Has no one got anything they want to share this week? How many people are in the game? Okay, let's see how people are doing. I really wish I could see gameplay. Oh, Misha, she's doing well. Oh, she lost all the gold. Nish is at the top of the leaderboard. Okay, we'll literally just go until the clock hits 2 minutes. You've got 2.5 minutes. I have to say, I preferred the music of the other game. The chef one was really calming. Good jazz that was. Oh, Baguette. It feels weird saying Baguette, but Baguette's 35.4K, doing excellent, smashing the game. Oh, ho, ho, ho. Zara smashing this game, absolutely. Let's see who's down bottom. A all the way down the bottom with 425. Misha, she's made a comeback, 71k. Doing well, doing well. Right, I'll literally give you another minute 20, and then we'll call it. Hopefully finding this good revision. Oh, oh. Oh, someone's dropped out. Someone's dropped out of the game. Oh. Okay, right. 42 seconds remaining, and then I'm gonna call it. Okay, 23 seconds remaining. Nish is slaying it with 580k. S2S champion. Not too far behind though. Misha was doing really well up until towards the end of the game. Right, 3 seconds. Then we're gonna call it. Two, one. Let's call it. Right, let's look at our final standings. Third, Baguette. Second, Nish. S2S champion. Holding it. Holding it. Nice. Holding position, as always. Good to see. Okay, let's see. Now that's a good score. We love to see 87% correct. This is good news to my ears. Um, let's see. So 80, yeah, nice. Misha absolutely slaying that percentage with the most questions answered and answered correctly. Absolutely amazing work. Right. Nice, guys. Hope we find it useful, these kind of things. Um, okay. Let me pull down what we are doing today. So we talked last week about the basics of AO4. And I want to kind of keep going over this, but I want to make it specific um, to AQA, for those of you who are doing AQA. I know not all of you are, most people do, but I want to talk you through the specifics of what's required for AQA Assessment Objective 4. Now, this will only be one question of your entire paper, but it's 20 marks, so it is worth absolutely cracking down with, because 20 marks out of 160, that's an eighth of your entire grade on this assessment objective. So it's worth really hammering home. And the question will look something like this. Paper 1, question 4, fiction. It will say, focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source. And it will give you the specific lines to use. So for this one, it's 20 to the end. A student said, this part of the story, where the hyena behaves wildly, is funny rather than frightening. The writer suggests that the hyena is actually no serious threat to Pi. So, what you will get in the exam is two distinct, separate statements. And you'll be asked, to what extent do you agree? Now, I've highlighted here the word extent because if you remember back to last week, we talked about what was required for AO4. And to get into the top marking band, we don't just want simple answers of I completely agree or I completely disagree. We want to be seeing that you can tackle alternative interpretations. So when it says to what extent do you agree, we want an answer that is partly agree, partly disagree. And you might agree with one of the statements, but not the other. You might also only partly agree with the statements. Either way, we want to see a balanced answer. Um, and there are technically just two separate statements. You might agree that yes, the hyena is funny rather than frightening. However, that might not necessarily make it not a threat to our main character Pi. And it will say down below, you could consider the impressions of hyena, evaluate how the writer presents the threats, and support your response with references. Now, we're going to think back again to our Peter paragraphs, but I'll leave that till later. But I keep those in mind for now. I've put down the side my advice for these kind of questions as always. I would always begin, if you can, with highlighting the important keywords of the question because you won't get any marks if you don't be specific and give relevant answers to the question. So when you're answering the question, you should always be considering these key terms, whether the hyena is funny, whether it's frightening, and whether it's a threat. So I would always start by highlighting the focus of the question, which in this case is specifically the hyena's behavior and whether it's funny or frightening, and whether it's actual threat. Because everything you're writing should be directly in answer to those two things. And because it's 20 marks, you get about 22 minutes on this question, so not a long time. Now, my advice for you is I would always begin by reading the extract and making and deciding whether you agree or not. That's kind of really the first place to start. Consider whether you agree or not with the statement and to what extent. This question relies on you picking out methods. A lot of students, you would be surprised, do not mention language or structural devices in this question. You must. And I will show you the mark scheme in a second as proof, but you must be mentioning language and structure in this question. Now, you don't need to be analyzing it in as much detail as, for example, questions 2 and 3, but you do need to mention them with basic explanations. And as my advice, you always want to be getting a range. So I'd be aiming for 3 per paragraph, maybe 4 if you wanted to. But I think 3 is a sweet spot. Because you're not really being tested on a range of terminology this time, like you were with AO2, but you are being tested on using them accurately. Now, I also would recommend that you always think about the effect on the reader as well, in as much detail as possible, and we'll revisit this later as well. But yeah, and the final thing is to use a wide range of well-chosen evidence with what I have put as precise keyword quotations to support your idea. And I would recommend 2 to 3 per paragraph. Okay. Now, I do want to mention some admin things here. For those of you that are, well, this year actually, going to study your GCSEs and sit your GCSEs, sorry, there are a couple of changes that you need to be aware of for your exams. In the past, the question has looked like this. It will say something like, a student said, and then it will give you the statements. This won't be a thing anymore. This is changing. Instead, AQA are going to remove any reference to the student. The reason they're doing this is to make sure that your writing, your answer, is not about the student. It's about the statements present. Because what they found in the past is a lot of people have actually focused on the student when really the student has nothing to do with this question. And really the focus is on the statements being made. So they're getting rid of it saying a student there to make sure that your judgment is critical and based on the text, not the person. They're also changing this word evaluate. So it says evaluate how the writer presents the threat of the hyena on Pi. They're changing this word evaluate to comment on. So it will say comment on how the writer presents X, Y, Z. The reason they're doing this is because, like I said before, not many people were mentioning language and structural devices. So by getting rid of this word evaluate, they're trying to encourage you to pick out language devices. Yeah, as sort of encouragement. So they're going to change that word evaluate there. Okay, right. So very quickly then, as always, I want to introduce you to the mark scheme so that you get an idea of what is required to get a good grade for this kind of question. Now, we'll focus, as we always do, on level 1. Level 1, which again, we don't want to be at. I don't want to see anyone here. makes a simple, limited response to the focus of the statement. So it's a simple and limited. To me, that implies that what you've written isn't necessarily tightly linked to the question at hand. So, for example, here they've put, even though the hyena seems frightening at first, it doesn't actually hurt Pi and ends up making itself sick and giving up. Yes, they've mentioned the hyena, but it's not necessarily related to whether it's a threat or not. Like they've not made a very evident point, especially not one that's particularly high level. Now, for level one, we also need to show limited understanding of the writer's methods. So here they've put the writer uses the sounds of the animal so that the reader can imagine what it is doing and the noise it is making. Yes, they've given a very brief, basic explanation, but they've not mentioned any language devices or any structural devices. So we definitely need to be doing that. Select simple, limited textual references. Yeah, they've used one, which is pretty good, but they've used quite a long quote. All morning, the hyena ran in circles, going yip, 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 yip. Yeah, they've only used one quote, and the one they have used is relatively long. Make simple, limited evaluative comment on the effects of the reader. You could definitely see why an animal behaving like this would be funny to watch, but it's not really scary, and the ending makes this clear because Pi isn't hurt at all. Now, yeah, they've kind of begun to mention the reader, but they've not been specific about the exact effect on the reader. Hence why they've only got number one. However, we don't want to be there. I know none of you want to be there. I know I'm confident that you all will be up here. We all want level 3, level 4. So we don't even really want level 2, but I'll read it to you anyway. It makes some response to the focus of the statement. So Pi is clearly frightened of the hyena up until the end of the extract, but a lot of things that the hyena does are actually quite funny. So yeah, they've mentioned the wording of the question, hence why it's slightly related. But again, they've not answered it directly, so they can't get above this level. They've also only shown some understanding of the writer's methods. So they've mentioned the repetition of the yip, but that's really it. One language device is all they've mentioned. So there is some recognition of language, but certainly no detailed explanation of language or writer's methods. Select some appropriate textual references. Again, they've done the same thing. They've chosen that one long quote. Fair enough. And they've made some evaluative comments on the effect of the reader. So, however, it is not actually a very threatening sound, and it stops suddenly at the end of the extract when the hyena gives up. The writer is now certain that Pi was never under any threat at all. Yeah, again, they've given very relative, brief explanations of the effect on the reader, but nothing high level. Nothing of the words that I give you to use that I would recommend using. I know none of us are going to be down here. I have confidence, I have faith that you will be above this. Okay, now these are the two that we want to be at. Let's start with level 3. I'll just read them to you this time. So it makes a clear and relevant response to the focus of this statement. So while Pi is understandably frightened of the hyena, it soon becomes clear that its behavior is more amusing than threatening. Nice, it's a succinct, direct statement in answer to the question. We'd like to see it. So it shows clear understanding of the writer's methods. Now they've used multiple language devices. They've chosen the repetition, and they've mentioned the onomatopoeic nature of the yip as well. And they've given it a slightly higher level explanation. They've mentioned that it makes it relentless. And they've compared the amusing nature to the terrifying one, which is a bit higher level. And they've evaluated clearly the effect on the reader. They put the longer this repeated movement and sound goes on, the less of a surprise it is to us when the hyena suddenly collapses at the threat and the threat disappears. But we want level 4. That's why we're all here, isn't it? So forget level 4. We need to be developing a convincing and critical response to the focus, showing a perceptive understanding of the writer's methods, selecting a range of judicious textual detail, and evaluating critically and in detail the effect on the reader. So notice here we've got words like perceptive understanding, critical evaluation, judicious textual range. We need to be going above and beyond to be ticking the boxes. Now, I want to link this mark scheme to the PTAR paragraph structure that we looked at last week. So, if we really break it down, this first bullet point is really related to the point of our structure, developing a convincing and critical response to the focus of the statement. What this really means is giving a succinct, relevant, and appropriate statement that clearly and is directly linked to the question, that considers the extent to which you agree to the statement. So we need something that's relevant. It's directly using the words of the question. It's answering the question directly. Now, point two shows a perceptive understanding of the writer's methods. This is equivalent to our terminology and analysis. We need to be using language and structural devices and considering those multiple interpretations that weigh the arguments and counter arguments. Selecting a range of judicious textual detail, that's our evidence. A relevant and tightly linked selection of multiple quotes that are linked and support and bolster your points. So not just using one quote, but using multiple short quotes that are all linked together. That will get you the higher mark. And then we've got our link to the reader, comments directly on the effect of the reader. So prove to you that the Peter paragraph is exactly the way we want to be writing, because each of those bullet points ticks off our Peter paragraph. Okay. So if I were you, the first thing I would do if I was approaching this kind of question is I'd go through and I'd highlight all of the key words in this question, just so you know exactly what is being asked of you. So, firstly, it tells you up here, line 20 to the end is where you should be using. Now, as a key kind of brief advice, make sure to stick within that range. Be careful to focus on the section you're given. I get so many students who give me quotes from outside of those lines. You're not going to get any marks if you give me a quote from line 10 because it's asked you about lines 20 to the end. So make sure every quote you're giving is within that range because otherwise you're not going to get the marks. So be careful there. Now, it also gives us two statements to consider. Firstly, I'd highlight, if I were you, the focus of the question, which in this case is the hyena. The hyena is the focus of this statement, specifically whether it's funny or frightening. The second focus is again on the hyena, but it's considering whether it's a threat or not. So always make sure you know exactly what the focus is of the question, because you should be trying to use those words in your answer to tell the reader that you are answering the question directly. Okay, it also then asks us that, or rather tells us that we could use your impressions of how the hyena behaves. When it says impressions, it means your own ideas. What do you think? So in this sort of criteria, you need to be thinking about developing your own ideas about the hyena. How do you see it? How do you think? But not only telling me that, but explaining why you think that way. What has made you think that way? What has made you see the hyena that way? And off that, in order to get the sort of higher level band 4, we need to be considering multiple interpretations. Thinking about not only why the writer has done what they've done, but can it be viewed in multiple ways? Then it asks you to evaluate how the writer presents the threat. So this is where you mention your language and structural devices. Go through the text, highlight them, decide whether they've been used and if you want to use them in your answer. And then finally, it's a supporting response with references to the text. This is our evidence again. We need to be using short keyword quotations and preferably using multiple linked quotes. So like I said, making sure that you're doing at least 2 per paragraph that are linked together and support each other. Okay. So I've just put this back on. If you were here last week, you remember this. whenever you're writing an AO4 question, you should always be considering these sub-questions in relation to the PTAR paragraph structure. Um, I won't go through this again because I gave you it last week, but I'm going to leave it on the slides for you to peruse when you come to revision. But I would always recommend just thinking about these questions as you're going through. And I've done the same with sentence starters. I've given you some examples of sentence starters that you could use for each of the parts of your answer. Again, I won't go through these in detail. They're for you to peruse, to take away. But I would recommend getting some inspiration from these. So, for example, when you're writing your point, like I said, I don't want you to fully agree or disagree. We want to be in the nice boundary of to what extent do you agree? So maybe you say, to a large extent, I agree with this statement. However, blah, 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 blah. Or I mostly agree that the writer presents. I partially agree. All of those are great ways to start your point because it's telling me, the reader, where you stand. You need to make it clear what your point is and how far you agree. And it's better that you only partially agree. You could even say, while the statement is convincing, it could be argued that. How you write is up to you, but I will leave them here. And I've done the same for analyzer and reader as well. So, before we go through an example text and some model answers, I wanted to briefly remind you of these from last week as well. We went through judgments. We talked about what is or how best to write and form a judgment for your point. Like I said, we want to be here. We want to be in this partly agree boundary. It's fine if you do fully agree or disagree with the statements, but purely from a marking perspective, what a marker wants to see is your ability to weigh options, to consider alternative interpretations. Only then are you going to get into that band four. So I personally would recommend you approach any of these questions with an open mind. You need to approach them with a partly agree frame of mind. Because if you don't, you're probably limiting yourself to band three. So I said to get into band four, focus on partly agreeing. First, consider how someone else would view the text differently to you, but follow that up with your viewpoint. And I've also relapsed these slides as well. Often I find that students find it difficult to use multiple quotes. It's very often that I'll read an example answer and there'll only be one quote used. Now, it might be a good quote, but if you're not using multiple quotes, we can't be ticking off the judicial range of quotes, which is where we want to be for band four. So I'm going to just talk you through my ideas of how we could use multiple quotes or how best to frame your writing style so you can use multiple quotes. Now, I would always recommend this first option. You know, a lot of people go down the boring route and say, like, the writer says this, then they also say this. I wouldn't do that. I'd embed multiple quotes into the same sentence. So instead of saying the writer says a cold night, the writer also says dark sky, you could just write something like the cold night and dark sky, blah, 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 blah. It's a good way of just using multiple quotes in the same sentence. Just embed them together. Don't focus on separating them. Just use them together. I would also recommend using shorter quotes. A lot of people will literally just take like really long quotes, and I'll be reading it, and I'll be like, you could easily separate this really long quote into two shorter ones, and that's a good trick. If I was going to give you any advice, if you really like a long quote, consider breaking it down. You could just pick two smaller parts of that long sentence. And the reader would be none the wiser. Like if I was reading that and you'd done that, I would count that as two separate quotes. So it's a good trick to hit this judicious range of quotes, kind of bullet points. It's just to take longer quotes and break them down into smaller ones. So, for example, I put the character is pinned by fear and later cannot move, which reinforces the idea of paralysis. I'd embed small quotes. Don't be using long ones, be using small quotes. No more than 4 words, I would recommend. If you're doing more than 4 words, you're probably doing too much as a quote. If you want, a good way of using multiple quotes is to compare them or build between the quotes. So, for example, while pinned by fear suggests mental paralysis, cannot move extends this to a physical entrapment, intensifying the reader's sense of tension. Yeah, a good way of doing it is comparing between quotes or using them to build onto your points. And then I've also just put avoid or rather vary how you introduce them. There's nothing more boring than when the people introduce quotes the same way. The writer says this. Now, we've seen it all before. Use different sentence starters. It makes it more interesting for a reader to read, and it also makes it easier for you to compare multiple quotes. So, for example, this shift from something to something, you could insert 2 separate small quotes into that sentence easily. Similarly, in contrast, later, vary how you start the sentences. It will make it so much easier mentally for you to do so. Sorry, Asha, I missed your thing. Will they care about fancy sentence starters? As I always just use this suggests. Does it get extra marks? That doesn't matter. No, I would say that doesn't matter. I mean, there's other ones you could use. So like this suggests is a good one. This demonstrates, this emphasizes. I would always kind of try and vary them though a little bit. Like if you were comparing quotes using things like contrastingly or similarly or conjunctively, congruently, any sort of good connectives, good ways to vary your sentences. But in terms of like this suggests, that's fine. Um, we're not marking you down for using this suggests multiple times, but there are definitely more interesting ways you could introduce quotes and explanations, like demonstrates, emphasizes, highlights, any of those. When 2 or 3 quotes have been or have a shared theme, like imagine if you have a semantic field, because a good way to compare quotes. But anyway, I've highlighted in pink the bit I want you to think about. This question, I meant to put this question, not question, sorry. This question requires a judicious range of quotes. So my recommendation is that you try to use 2 or 3 appropriately linked and relevant ones per paragraph, just so that you're able to tick off that judicious expectation. Okay. And I've left for you as well our language and structure spider diagrams. I'm not going to go through these. We've been through these so many times, but I've left them here as a reminder to you. And I've highlighted in the mark scheme again, just to remind you the importance of why you need to use them, because it asks you for a perceptive understanding of writers' methods, meaning that you need to be picking out multiple of these and giving a very detailed explanation. But I just want to quickly re-stress to you that unlike AO2, AO4 is not about language analysis. It's not about the detail you use to analyze quotes. For AO4, you'd get away with giving a more brief explanation. You don't really need to be doing connotations and all of that, but you do need to be considering how the technique has been used to present the writer's intentions. And the key word here is writer's intentions. You need to be considering why the writers used these in your answer and how that has influenced your opinion on the statements. So I'll leave you these for language and structure. And then I also just briefly just wanted to remind you of interpretations as well. We went over these last week. We looked at an example text where you could interpret things differently. But it's important. If you want that band 4, I implore you to try looking at quotes from different perspectives. Yeah, it's what's going to get you the band 4. So we talked interpretations before. For example, down here, I said the word dark could suggest danger or fear, but equally it could symbolize uncertainty about the future. 2 different ways of looking at the word dark. Up to you. And I wanted to reiterate connotations, because words can have different meanings depending on the reader as well, and counter arguments. I will leave that for now, because it's all stuff we did last week. So, just to give you some examples of interpretations from the text that I've used as an example today, um, here are some. So, firstly, if we're taking the quote from the bottom, the question, let's remind ourselves, is about whether the hyena is frightening or is funny, and whether it's a threat. Now, you could take the quote at the bottom. It says, yip, 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 in a high pitched way. Now, one way you can interpret this is that it is quite funny. And the reason being because it's onomatopoeic, that it kind of gives you the animalistic imagery of being like a dog. When I think of yipping sounds, I think of like a little chihuahua, just like, yip, 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 yip. You know what I mean? You don't think of like a dangerous predatory beast. So the onomatopoeia to me gives me the imagery and connotations really of a tiny little unthreatening animal. So I said the kind of onomatopoeic sounds make it sound ridiculous and weak. Therefore, it's not a threat, nor is it scary. However, you could view this on the other end as well and say, okay, it might come across as kind of like dog-like. However, the fact that it's repeated this sound so many times gives it a relentless quality, almost suggesting that it's quite a manic animal, almost quite mentally unstable, which in a way makes it quite scary because it becomes unpredictable, as if it could attack at any moment. So the noise, though the onomatopoeia makes it quite funny, actually kind of has undertones of being quite scary because it suggests it's got predatory anticipation. Like it's signaling growing aggression because it's so relentless. It's like a madman. Like on the surface, I'm trying to think of a good example of an animal that's like dangerous but doesn't look it. Kind of like dolphins. Dolphins are quite dangerous. On the like surface, they look really cute, but actually they're quite dangerous and threatening animals. So this is kind of the point of being like, don't judge a book by its cover. Just because it's onomatopoeic and kind of reminds you of like weaker animals doesn't mean at all that it's not threatening. It could absolutely be. And I think the relentless repetition makes it feel unpredictable and unstable, which is quite scary. Equally, you might want to look at this quote. It did one lap, two, three, four, five, and onwards non-stop. Now, one interpretation of this, the listing here, makes it sound like someone's counting laps in a race, which makes it slightly humorous because it feels surreal. It feels like so shocking and surprising that it's just kind of funny. But then equally, kind of similar to the repetitive yipping sound, that kind of like repetitive lap that it's taking almost feels obsessive, like it's losing control. It's unpredictable again. It's irrational. The circular movement kind of symbolizes stalking and predatory behavior. You know, okay, it might be like a dog chasing its tail. It's going round and round and round and round and round. But on a symbolic level, it's trapped its prey. So, yeah, okay, it might be quite funny because it's like, it feels like it's spiraling out of control and it feels like it's not predatory at all. But equally, again, don't judge a book by its cover. It could be that that's it stalking its prey, it's trapped its prey. And almost the lack of control is what makes it quite scary because it's irrational, it's unpredictable. So I'd always kind of think about things from multiple perspectives. And then a final thing is to remind you of the effect on the reader. Please use one of these words when thinking about the effect on the reader. It will help you to explain the effect on the reader and it will make it clearer to the examiner what your explained effect is. So I will leave this here for you as well as always for you to peruse. And I've given you a little paper one question for checklist of things that as you're writing an answer in the future, if you ever want to send me anything, please do. But I would try and tick these things off. So have you used a direct and clear point answering the question with a consideration of an alternative view? Have you used relevant quotes linked together? 3 times short quotes per paragraph? Have you used 3 plus language or structural devices per paragraph? Have you analyzed the writer's methods explaining your viewpoint? Have you offered an alternative interpretation? Have you mentioned the effect on the reader? And have you done at least 2 detailed PTAR paragraphs or 3 less detailed? And I should really have mentioned this in the beginning, but for this kind of question, you're looking at 2 detailed paragraphs or 3 less detailed. Okay, so, we've not got long. I've taken a bit longer than I planned to for this. I do apologize. Ashley says, I sent you a mock. I don't think I've received that. When did you send it? I sent you back your other stuff. Mr. Siddiqui hadn't sent it to you, by the way. I had marked it. It'd been sat on his desk for like a week. I chased him up about it after you mentioned it last week. Ooh, I haven't got it. I will chase Mr. Siddiqui up for that as well. But I will get it back to you, of course. Okay, so let's look at some example answers for this kind of question. Now, we're not going to use the hyena one, but we'll use this. Focus this part of your answer from line 16 to the end. A student said, this part of the story, set during breakfast time, shows that Alex is struggling to cope with his mother's illness. To what extent do you agree? Okay, now we're not going to work through it together, but I will show you some example answers for this. So I was meant to cover that up to get you to guess, but you know now 3 marks, band 1. So let me read it through for you. With this statement, I would agree that Alex is struggling to cope, as it says that he was angry. The writer says Alex was angry with his father, his sister, life in general, even with his mother for anything, I think that says. This suggests that he cannot cope with the mother's illness as he is very angry. The writer also says how enormous her presence had been. This suggests that he is missing his mother and cannot cope very well. Right, why do you think that gone band 3? Any ideas in the chat? Anyone contributes? Why do you think that got band 3? Is there anything it could have done better? I mean, let's look at the quote. Let's look at the examiner's comments. It says incomplete quotation. I personally think that quote to me is too long. It could have easily broken that down. And as well, his point was quite repetitive. Like he talked about the cannot coping with the mother illness and being angry multiple times throughout that quite short paragraph. A misquotation here, how enormous his presence had been. And again, only a very simple response to the statement. He says that he agrees that Alex is struggling, but doesn't give an extent and doesn't give any alternative interpretations. So if we look at the mark scheme, yeah, definitely ticks this band. A very simple and limited response. I mean, 2 tiny paragraphs, not really enough content for a good A4 mark. No mention of language or structural devices. 2 quotes used that were quoted firstly incorrectly and B too long. And then only a very simple comment. I don't think there's any effect on the reader there either. So no language or structural devices and no reader. Definitely can't get out band 1. Okay. Okay, I want you to, as I'm reading this, guess how many marks this next one got. So I fully agree that Alex is struggling to cope with his mother's illness. I think that Alex is a character of passion and hatred. When something gets him mad, he doesn't just blame something, he starts blaming everyone and everything. The writer shows this by saying Alex was angry with his father, his sister's life in general, even to his mother for getting sick. One reason why I think he's struggling to cope is through his speech on how things are different, how now that she is ill. The writer introduces a list of the things to miss about her. For example, it says, he missed her music, her flowers, the once familiar fragrance of fresh baked cookies. This suggests that from his day-to-day life, all he does is think about her and what he misses about her. This links back to the beginning of the line 10, as it's saying how he was not in the mood to applaud his father's effort, implying that he's falling into a depression state where little things like that don't seem to matter anymore. Another piece of evidence is when Nicole asks, "When's Mama going to get better?" Alex's sudden response is to shut up Nicole, suggesting that he refuses to talk about it, and as it goes on further to talk about how they think she's going to die. Alex rushes out of the kitchen something without breakfast, suggesting he's lost his appetite for confusion. I'll stop there; it's quite long. But what do we think this got? I'm saying 9. Anyone agree with 9? Why did you think 9? I would agree. I think that this got exactly 9. And the reason being, if we look at the mark scheme, it's definitely towards the upper of band 2, but it's not going to breach band 3. I mean, there was some mention of writers with language and structure, but not many. There was speech, there was a list mentioned, but that's kind of it. So it was definitely not going to get high band 2. Um, there is definitely a more focused response to the question. This suggests, like down here, there was multiple quotes used correctly, so I would say we're getting good here with the amount of quotes that we're using. I think that's why this got upper band 2, is because of sheer amount of quotes that they used, with a fairly decent amount of explanation as well. Now, had they used more language and structural devices, I think this would have got 10. Um, yeah, I think that would have got 10. Let's see what they put, the examiner. They put with some attempts at evaluation, some response to the focus of the statement with some appropriate textual references. Weakest aspect is writer's methods, which are occasionally identified but never considered. So they're saying that the writer's methods were kind of mentioned but weren't explained in detail, and that there was some focus on the statement. This response is typical of level 2. There's some ambiguity. Um, yeah, some ambiguity. The response could have been improved by addressing the above points and also focusing more on the writer's methods. Exactly as I said, yeah. If they'd have focused more on language and structural devices, this would have been pushed up to 10 or 11. But because they didn't do that, there was definitely no way it could have been pushed up. Okay, go on. See if you can get this see if you can get this spot on for this one as well. So I agree with this. Firstly, because the writer shows that Alex's emotions vary on the topic of his mother, yet all show that he is struggling to cope. Alex was angry with his father, sisters, wife in general, life in general, sorry, with his mother for getting sick. Shows that Alex's first instinct is to be angry due to the adjective angry in the quotation, even with his mother for getting sick. Shows that Alex appears to be struggling to cope with her illness as he is blaming even his mother, showing that Alex's character is one which needs a constant emotional outlet. I'll skip to the next paragraph to go where the highlighting is. I also agree because the text explicitly states that Alex misses his mother, as he missed her easy laughter and her affection, even her discipline. The verb missed shows that Alex wants his mother well again and cannot cope with her absence. The fact that Alex is described to miss even her discipline shows that even features that he disliked before, now appealing features that he misses, showing that Alex wants nothing more than things to return to how they were before. I also agree because the writer's semantic field negativity is often hinted to be part of a result of Alex's mother's illness. Her contrast, her caress, which once were explosions of colour, suggests that she became ill. Alex's life is greyed as a result. This shows that Alex can no longer experience happiness or excitement or have a colourful perspective on the world. Blah, 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 blah. I'll stop there because, again, it's really long. But go on. Ooh, you've gone with 7 or 8 on this one. This actually got 12. It's actually band 3. And if you look at the mark scheme, I mean, I personally think I wouldn't have given this as high as it got. I would have gone upper band 2, maybe low band 3, so 10 and 11. I probably wouldn't have gone as high as 12, but this person did. Um, yeah, I mean, the amount of quotes they've got is nice. They've done a little bit more. I think the reason this got slightly higher than the last one is because there's more of a focus on language and structure. So the semantic field, for example, the adjectives, the verb somewhere. There's more of a focus on language and structure compared to the last one. Hence why it got a couple marks higher than the last one. But I think it's the same level of explanation, personally. Hence why I probably wouldn't have given it more than 10 or 11 myself. But there you go. Clear and relevant evaluation, clear understanding of the writer's methods, although benefit of doubt given to candidate with semantic field. This response could have been improved by an evaluation of a wider range of ideas and a greater focus on the writer's methods. So again, they're saying more language and structure, especially by considering the effects of more than one example of semantic field. Okay, right. I know we've not got long left, so let's look through our last one really quick. Now, before I even read through this, I want to note how short it is before we think about what it's worth. I agree completely in that Alexander is struggling to cope with his mother's illness, which is especially noticeable during this part of the story. This is evident during Alexander's outburst at his sister's predictions about his mother dying, where he says, "You two are just kids. You don't know what you're talking about." This shows a sense of denial from Alexander. This could even show his longing for a sense of normality from his past, of when his mother was was ill, which, however, may not come true as predicted by his sister. It could be said that this inevitability of his prediction is similar to the storm, as it is impossible to stop a storm by simply denying its existence, as Alexander is trying to do with his mother's illness. Also, the storm could represent the inevitable chaos within the house if his mother dies, as there is already a chaotic structure in the Cold household, where each of them ate wherever and wherever they pleased, and even goes so far as to refer to the situation as almost like a party. In this last paragraph, Alex reflects on his memories of his mother before the illness, which furthermore portrays the sense of longing for his mother and the lifestyle of order that he was used to. By listing the aspect of his life before his mother's illness and going on to describe his mother as little more than a silent ghost, creates a sense of change and helps the reader to imagine the vast impact of the illness. And I'll leave it there. Oh, nice. So 16 or 17. Got 18. I like it. I agree. I'd probably given it a 16 or 17 rather than 18, but it got 18. And I think rightly so, really, because if we look at the mark scheme, the focus on language and structure is a lot greater in this one. They've talked about the symbolism of the storm. They've talked about the listing. They talked about the imagery down here. Um, yeah. So the language and structure is a lot more focused on this one. But I don't think there's enough to justify for me personally, sorry, giving it 18. That's my opinion. I probably wouldn't have done. Um, but yeah, they've definitely given a more focused critical response. They've given an alternative interpretation, which we love to see. And they've backed it with quotes that have been embedded into the answer. They've not said the writer says this and then given a quote. They've embedded them. It's beautiful. So they've got a judicious range of quotes. They've used multiple interpretation. They've commented on writers' methods. Tick, tick, tick. They've put perceptive evaluation and convincing response to the focus of the statement. Perceptive understanding of writers' methods with the judicious textual detail. This response demonstrates an intelligent choice of the writer's methods on which to focus. The candidate references details earlier in the passage, but always in relation to the events in the given lines, which is perfectly acceptable. This conciseness of the response shows that level 4 can be achieved if the quality of valuation and the analysis of writers' methods are sufficiently perceptive. So I guess that's worth ending on here, because that you can get level 4 as long as your writing is detailed and the evaluation is good quality, even if you don't write loads. So you can still do a short answer and get a good grade. Now, we're not going to have time, but the last thing I did want to show you was going back to the hyena example. I would always recommend when you approach this question to do a bit of a plan. This is where I would start. In the exam, you will not have time to plan in this much detail, but it's worth practicing if you're going to do some practice questions. I would kind of approach this kind of question with a plan just to kind of get you in the mindset and routine of approaching this kind of question. And I've given you, again, for you to peruse an example of a plan. So, what I would do the first time you read through a text, I would go through and highlight all of the relevant quotes relating to the two statements. And I'd go through and start to pick out if there is any language or structural devices and give a very brief explanation for those. And I've given you a good one here with some multiple quotes. And as well, I've given you an example, full mark answer that I've written with color coordination for a Peter paragraph so that you know what kind of quality we're looking for. But I will leave that here for you to peruse at your own leisure in the notes because I know it's quite late. Right, let's call it there. I'll stay around for a couple of minutes in case anyone wants to ask me any questions, but otherwise, have a lovely week, guys. What's my favorite restaurant? Um, that's a good question. I think I particularly have a favorite restaurant. I really like Italian or Thai food, so probably something to do with that. Um, I used to really love Gusto's, but they closed the ones in Leeds recently. That was a good restaurant. Any related English questions anyone wants to ask me? If not, we will call it. I will take that as a no, because most people have left. Okay. Right, let's call it there then. Right, have a nice week to those of you who are still here.